Today is a little bit of an unusual episode for the Roadman podcast. I sit down with one of my childhood best friends, Ciaran O'Conluain. This is a lad who I grew up next door to. We played football together, went to school together. I was best man at his wedding. But importantly for this conversation, we started out cycling at basically the exact same stage. We made all the mistakes together. We took all the trips across Europe and into North America together. We sit down to deconstruct what worked for us, what didn't work for us, what we change, and some laughs along the way. Welcome to the Roadman podcast, Ciaran O'Conluain. Ciaran, welcome.
Thank you.
It's been a minute. How are you?
Yeah, very good, yeah.
We're talking about how I got into cycling. We're the journey back.
I was before you got into cycling. Saw the full 360.
I was trying to think about cycling as a kid. I don't remember. I remember, obviously, obsessed with football. Everyone was obsessed with football, and we played literally morning, noon, and night. But there wasn't like an ecosystem. Anyone that's not that's under 30 listening to this is going to sound ridiculous, like we're from the Victorian era. But it's like there wasn't a way to find out about cycling teams or any cycling information. Like I didn't know one person who was an actual cyclist. Like there was a lad down the end of the road, remember Jack Quinn's dad, who had a racing bike. He was the closest I knew to a cyclist because he had a skinny wheeled, 23mm tires. But I couldn't think of one person I knew who was in a cycling club or anything about a cycling club. So although I really loved cycling, I had no real outlet to express that love for cycling.
Yeah. No, I absolutely knew nothing. Like I remember coming into your house during the summer and it's boiling and I just remember walking into the house and you're in your back room with the curtains closed, feet up on the couch, watching cycling on TV, and I'm like, come on, we're going out playing football. And you're like, no, this is unbelievable.
When was that?
Like, I would say you were like 13 or 12 or something like that. And it would have been
Channel 4, Phil Liggett.
Channel 4, Phil
Liggett.
Yeah. And I remember just looking at the screen, and for me, it just looked like ants, like helicopter coming over, and like ants, and you're like, this is amazing what's happening. I'm like, why would you watch people just cycling their bike? This is useless.
I don't think I fully knew what was going on then, because I don't even think Phil Liggett and Paul Sherman fully knew what was going on there. Definitely Phil Liggett didn't. He was like Armstrong's fucking #1 fanboy. But yeah, I didn't know there was other races outside the Tour de France even. I thought it was just Tour de France. Like I didn't know you'd Roman the Swiss, this build up that went in Grand Tours before that.
Well, what year was the Tour de France come to Dublin? Because we went in with your dad.
98.
That was 98? Yeah. No, it must be earlier than that.
Festina Affair, 98. Remember 2 days later or 3 days later they got caught crossing the border.
So we were like, I was like 17, you were like 15 or something like that.
Yeah. No.
And I still have the bottle from that at home, the Coca-Cola Tour de France bottle. But I genuinely thought we were like 12.
No, yeah, that was 98. There was something, the Nissan Classic, I went into the city centre for. And I have a picture. I'd love to try and find it. It'd be a brilliant way. We get great mileage out of it. Laurent Fignon, the professor, my dad bumped into him. We were just like walking down O'Connell Street. And he, like the only person that recognised him was my dad. And he got a picture with me on Fignon's shoulders. I haven't seen it in years, but that's an absolute classic.
Dust. Yeah, that's gold dust. Yeah,
Fignon's dead now.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of people don't. We're getting older.
I'm pretty sure Fignon's dead. I hope I didn't just dox him. My first race I can remember is we set up the top of the street, like it was an old school urban time trial where they're like full gas down the street, left. Up JOH's road, top of that road, back down. Lethal.
Come around the bend. Probably fairly well prepared for regular cycling as well, though. But I do remember the race I won. Do you remember the race I won on the street?
The slow bicycle
race. Anto's dad was amazing at doing sports day for all the road. And he was just unreal. They have trophies for every event. And one of the events was a slow bicycle race. And not a lot of people really understood
it was just a full track stand.
And so he had to just stop. And I remember I was in last place. So I was almost coming to the finish line that you were like not supposed to touch. You were dead if you went past the finish line. It was like 100 meters. And everyone just comes up to me, oh, you won. I was like, oh, what how'd that happen? I was like, everyone else fell off their bike trying to go really slow.
But there's a weird kind of erosion of community. And we were talking about this recently, me and another one of the lads we know, Sean McKenna, who we came up training with, about volunteers has been such a hot topic in cycling, not just in Ireland, around the world, lack of volunteers. So much of it's very complicated. But one of the things we were even talking about is the difference between if you're a home owner versus if you rent. Like, have you seen the data on if you rent in an area, you're less likely to speak out about antisocial stuff, you're less likely to be involved in clubs, in community. So you think stuff like home prices don't have a knock-on effect into volunteer, but it's even just that. It's not just that. Like, it's very multifaceted. But that example just highlights how complicated that lack of volunteers is. And then I look back to what you're talking about, like my dad doing these sports days where he's going down the beach with a trailer to get sand to come back and build sand pits for a long jump. That's generationally totally changed.
I would say that absolutely has changed. I would love to see the data on volunteerism. I would actually think that there's more volunteers almost than ever nowadays, but it's the most organised. The GAA. I was at Morton Stadium last night for Raheny Shamrocks. I'd say 50 volunteers, parents doing kids stuff there. And the GAA are so well organised. I know parents that are in really busy jobs that are doing GAA 2 or 3 times a week volunteerism.
Yeah, the GAA is almost, I don't know, in Ireland I think it almost operates in an economy outside the economy because it's so tribal, it's so parochial. Even the areas like where we're living, which wouldn't be particularly well galvanised, the GAA, it represents like everything about what it means to be Irish. But also, if you look at what the governing body do around that, like, you're heavily incentivized to be a volunteer. There's perks to being a volunteer. It's not just you're volunteering and you get nothing back from that other than the intrinsic enjoyment of giving back to the sport. Like, you're getting comp tickets to All Ireland finals, you're getting, track suits, you feel like you're getting part of something.
You are definitely getting stuff, but I do think that people's time are obviously crunched because where back in our day, a lot of those people that would have been single income families, and that was like normal. Like, do you know what I mean? Like 30, 40 years ago, a lot of people would survive on mother at home, father working. That would be the standard. And now with 2 parents working, there's not a lot of time. So if you're volunteering for something, like, they've hooked you, that's it, I've done my volunteerism.
There's conflicting demands on your time. So it's not just, we RTE1, RTE2 for a long time in the house. You had 2 channels. Not a lot of pull to stay in and not volunteer because you're watching the new season, The Designated Survivor. Like, that's a random reference. But, I've been sick on the couch all week watching absolute turf. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's a change in landscape, and I think it's going to be a challenge. But back to that gap between, so football dominated.
Yeah.
And then it was university before I picked a bike. We both went to the same school. You're a couple of years ahead of me. Teacher in school, Fergus Ryan, was really when I started thinking about cycling again.
Probably the second race bike person we've seen in our lives, and we were at that stage like 14 or something like that.
And I thought he was an alien. Like, I see him coming into school because this is a working class North Dublin school with just lads around. And even the teachers were like, I'm thinking back, my maths teacher, Alfie Martin, who played inter-county football for Galway. And then you have this lad coming in his spandex, in his Cervelo R3, and his Dura Ace. And it was like, I don't know, it was like just seeing something from a different planet.
It was very, very different, yeah. And like, it was the first time we'd really seen like anything to do with cycling at all. And he used to cycling from Skerries every day and home.
70-minute ride,
which we thought was just like, people used to think that was just absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, that was like riding 500 kilometers back then. But I actually didn't start. I know, not that I had no interest. Probably did have no interest. I was at that kind of age where I was leaving football and kind of a bit lost, didn't know what was going on. It wasn't until I got into UCD that I remember reconnecting with that teacher, Gus, and saying, here, I'm thinking of buying a bike. What should I be looking at? And I got a bike second hand off, actually a mad story. I got a bike, I'm not sure if you remember this. I got Ger Hartman.
Yeah.
So I said I needed a loan for a car to go to college. Forged that application. I got $2 grand, I think, loan. And I don't know how I got in contact with Jared Hartman, who was Lance Armstrong's physio. And
you and your dad went down together. Yeah.
But even when you think back to how bizarre this is, so I went down to meet him, to buy a bike off him. He wouldn't sell me the bike unless I went training with him. Imagine that now. So I had to go training with him and have lunch with him.
Adverts, and you have to go cycling with the lad.
Yeah, and I do. It wasn't like I'd done an hour. I'd done 6 hours with him. And he absolutely took the boots to me. Like, he dropped me on every climb.
That wouldn't have been a hard thing to do at that stage for you either.
So I came in absolutely dead. And he's like, no, I see you've something there, so I'm willing to sell this to you. I was like, what? So Armstrong had paid him. Armstrong had a bad back.
Yeah.
He used to say he was
mentioned in his book.
Was he?
Yeah, he was mentioned in his book. Yeah.
Famous physio. So he had a bad back. Armstrong flew him out to the tour to work on his back. Hartman sort of said, look, it's a privilege to work on you, so I'm not taking payment. And Armstrong gave him 2 of his bikes, which he was obviously using to fund his doping program. But he siphoned away 2 of them bikes, gave them. So Hartman kept 1 for himself, and I got 1 of them.
But that bike is literally probably worth like 200 grand like now.
And I crashed it in a Cat 3 race and broke it. But yeah, that bike was an absolute beast.
Oh, it was beautiful. Speed. Yeah.
It was beautiful. 2 grand.
And I remember my first bike story is with you, and it's very, very different to that story. Do you remember my first bike?
Your bike? Was it a Paganini?
No, that was my second bike. Do you remember my first bike?
I remember your first one.
Raheny Dart Station.
Oh, you bought the bike off some
Giant,
dodgy...
on adverts or boards or something like that. And we went to it, and you were like, oh, this is perfect for you. This is perfect. So I hadn't cycled, like, apart from cycling to school. So it was like I was 26. It's like 2007. And you were like, I'm going to France to go cycling with like 3 other lads for training camp. You should come with us. And I was like, I just finished my football season, and I was a goalkeeper. And we won the league and the cup, and I was loving it. And you were like, oh, come on, just for the off season, come over. I'll give you a 10-week training plan. I don't even have a bike. Like,
what was the bike?
A giant TCR, but it was like a 52-inch frame.
I can't remember it.
It was yellow, and it was absolutely tiny. It was genuinely like this wide. Like, it was like 2 feet wide. See,
we didn't know anything about frame size and stuff then.
Absolutely nothing. And so you were like, oh, we'll just lift up the saddle height. It's grand. But like... So I paid like 250 quid for that, and we had to meet him, and he would only meet us in like the dark corner. He was like, I'm over here on the right. Like,
was it robbed? Yeah.
Like, I can't say it was robbed, like, but it was a very unusual circumstances. And I remember I rode that for about 6-7 weeks, and I was like, my legs are like dying here. What's going on? You were like, I'm sad to say this bike doesn't fit you. So we went out to UCD bike store, and you were like, oh, these lads really look after me out here. It's great. And we went out, and I remember...
There was a Woodstock veterinary, man. Every time you went in, it was just a smell of weed in the place, and he'd just give you stuff. Yeah. Hey, man, you're taking money out of my pocket.
He used to always do that to you. You'd spend all your days in there. And I went in, and I remember we looked at a bike, and it was this beautiful red Paganini with, like, silver wheels.
I remember it well.
And a 105 group set. And I remember he goes to me, I was like, how much is this bike? And he's like, 600 quid. And I genuinely thought that was, like... 25,000, he just said to me. I could not believe that you paid 600 quid for a bike. Like, it blew my mind.
And you want to see how expensive? You sent on one of our mates, football mates, the other day looking for bikes. And I was looking through for similar 105 now. You're looking at 2 grand.
Yeah,
you're not even getting 105 for 2 grand now. It's gone bananas. Yeah. Absolutely bananas. But I forgot that was your first trip. So you came to Les Deux Alpes then with me, Passo, and Noel Tonge.
Haven't been on the bike for 7 weeks or something like that. Never been on it before, ever.
Yeah, you're actually going well because you were so light. Whereas me and Passo were coming from being... I can't even remember the first time I got onto a weighing scales. Like, I didn't know... It wasn't as known that cycling was power to weight then. Like, it's so obvious now when anyone that gets into the sport. Like, there's a young lad in our club getting into it now, and he's like, I don't know, he's less than 60 kilograms. Like, straight away, you're like, oh, he's going to be good going uphill. Yeah. But we never really... Like, you knew it, but you didn't know it. Like, I definitely didn't have an awareness of weight on the bike. I just thought if I train, I'll get good. And then you were, like, almost instantly better than us, even though we'd been riding... a year. Like, you were going uphill better than us.
Yeah, I was going uphill well. What I remember was where you were unbelievably hard training. Like, you were like flat out, but your diet was just so bad.
But we didn't know what training was. Like, me and the other lad talking about Passo, we used to go out to the local hill on, I think we went Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We used to go out to Hote Hill and we'd ride like sometimes 4 or 5 hours just up and down the hill. But we'd hardly talk to each other because every time going up, we just race each other full gas, like absolutely flat to the mat. You come over the top dead and then come home and half wheel each other all the way down the coast. No food, no water, just go until someone blows.
But that's like, I think that's every person who, probably half the people who listen to this podcast is like every time they go out training, it's like, how can I just smash my group, smash my friends, go as hard as possible? And that's the thing that we learned was, it's like, everyone seems to be trained in the middle almost, because if you keep smashing yourself, you end up training in the middle. And so what took a while to learn was really hard recovery and really hard training.
Yeah, and even it's changed more since you've stepped away from the sport now, where it's like, even chatting to Professor Stephen Seiler, you know, you might do an easy 60 minutes recovery ride. He's like, there's no such thing as a recovery ride. Like, that's an oxymoron. Yeah. You're either recovering and you're off, or you're riding and you're training. Yeah. Recovery ride doesn't exist. Like that, he's like, there's never been a paper published to show the efficacy of a recovery ride.
Well, that was something that definitely was different between me and you. Like, I only realised later through blood tests that I suffer from sports anemia, so low red blood cells. So I was wondering why you were able to train so hard so often, and I just couldn't. My body just wasn't recovering. And so where you'd go out on like your rest day and do like an hour riding, I'd be like, I could never do that.
Yeah, different people definitely can take different load. And then I had the French, now we're jumping around timeline, but when I was in France, the manager was really big on sending the body consistent signals that you're, now France is not scientific at the best of times, like he wouldn't let us eat bread, but he was on about like consistent signals. You're a bike rider, so you get up in the morning and you ride your bike. The question is, do you ride long, do you ride hard, do you ride fast? But you ride every single day because you're a bike rider. So I rode for, I don't know, about 4 years, 7 days a week. Never took a day off. Like an hour will be the day off. Yeah,
for me, intuitively, so for you, our stories, you always did things to extreme. So it was like you always played way more football than me. Like you and John would be outside playing, and I'd hear the banging of the ball, but I'd be like, I've played 3 hours already today. The lads are out just pitch black
3 hours,
dark.
rookie numbers.
You were like, yeah, so you always did to extreme. And like, that has upsides and it has downsides. And so with cycling, like again, you always did to extreme, which got you where you got to. I guess you had to make a lot of errors. And
yeah, definitely if we went back doing it again, I think that's witnessed by you coming in slightly later than me, and then like Sean McKenna coming in slightly later than you. Each generation that came through our little training group had a much faster progression than the last. Now you could argue maybe each generation had slightly better genes than the previous, but who's to say that? Like, but definitely you were standing on the shoulder of the mistakes I made, and then for Sean, fast forward even more.
Like you came straight in and straight away gave me the cycling training Bible, which we always, I know you had Joe Friel on, and like that was just the foundation for us of like understanding maybe a different philosophy now that people use, but definitely an understanding. Like we educated ourselves, and then I just learned so much.
That was even rare then though.
Yeah.
Like very rare. Because you remember going to races, and I know you were later to get a power meter, but I remember going to races and lads were like looking on, what is that? Like, but it was very
even
rare.
Heart rate would have been very rare.
Yeah, and just the idea of taking time to plan out what's your week look like, what's your month look like, how does this build into an A priority? What a book that was from Joe Friel.
But you went straight into that. Like, so it's very interesting to see your journey. So like your life is still based around cycling, but like you just randomly picked it up after having not done it. Like, but you did show, like I remember when you were a kid, your dad had just hundreds of bikes out the back, like actually hundreds of frames out the back garden.
Yeah.
Like stuff behind a shed, in a shed. Hundreds of them. I remember we had to take them out one day when we were knocking down the shed, and you had this like BMX when you were like 6 that had it was, you called it the Millennium Falcon because
I remember that
Star Wars is really big, and your dad had stuck a motorbike speedometer on the front of it, so it was a round big massive speedometer, and you tried to get it to like 20 miles per hour. I remember that was your goal, and you were like, if I hit 20 I'm gonna go to light speed. So like you always had this like mad memories of like cycling. You were always there, but then you were just so dedicated to football.
Yeah, but see, I always had cycling was literally, you know, where we kind of lived very similar lives, but obviously my dad was building the bikes and selling them in the evening. So he'd probably sell, I don't know, I would say he'd sell 6-7 bikes a week back at the peak of that. But every bike he built the exact same colour, tried to build it to the exact same spec. It was this Coventry City blue. But from my earliest memories, like in life, are trying to take off stuck pedals, trying to unseize seat posts. Like I just worked on that. Like I actually have kind of blocked it out. I've been working on bikes since, you think I'd be a better mechanic. I've been working on bikes literally since I could walk. Like, like on my gravestone, I'd say my dad's expression, hold the torch steady, you handicapper. So you'd be in the shed with a torch at night trying to like fix a headset or something, and I'd be like all over the spot with it. It's like brutal.
You would genuinely think you'd be a better mechanic.
Yeah, I've had me moments. It's moving too fast for me. But Le Dos Alpes was definitely one of those moments where, like, again, we're sounding like we're from the Victorian era, but I hadn't travelled a lot. I'd say I'd been out of Ireland at that point twice in my whole life. And now you're going from a pretty, like, sterile urban environment to the Alps.
Yeah.
And you're seeing these, like, it's conjuring back the iconic images of, like, you know, Hino and Le Mans, that Graham Watson picture on the switchback 17 on Alpe d'Huez. And it's like that history is just, I think it was that really got its claws into me and hooked me. And I'm like, I need to figure out how to get good at this. It's just so cool. It's so, the romance around it. It also felt like there was an accessible pathway to get better, where football, you know, we'd all heard you have to be in England by the time you're 15, it's over by the time you're 17. Whereas cycling, as early 20-year-old, it's changed now, but as an early 20-year-old, you're like, I could progress from Cat 3 to Cat 2 to Cat 1 to domestic to pro. And you're like, whoa, this is just starting, so it's fresh and exciting as well.
Like, your dad always said to me, you should be in an individual sport. And I'd say you said that to you probably a lot as well. Because, like, we loved doing what we were doing, but obviously in a team environment, you're somewhat limited. Do you know what I mean? And, like, that makes it challenging. Whereas if you are more in an individual sport, for me, it was like you were saying, it was like a science project. Oh, what can I input now? And what will the output be in a week's time? And you just kept doing that overall. And as you said, it's so progressive. You can go from, like, my first goal was to beat my housemate Lenny up Holt. Then he used to cycle to work every day. And then a couple of times a week, he'd go straight up Holt after work. And I remember that was my goal when I started cycling, when you got me the bike. And I was like, I wanted to beat Lenny. And in no way did I think I'd be able to beat you. And so we went over to Alpe d'Huez, and I remember we cycled for one day or something around. First we got our bike sorted and borked us on down the bottom, and then the next day we went up Alpe d'Huez, and I had to take a phone call at the bottom because I run my own business, and I take a phone call at the bottom, and you was all shot off, and it was like we had an operation in America at the time, and I remember taking the call, and then you were all gone. I was like, oh no, put the earphones in, cycling up. And I remember just coming around one of the switchbacks and seeing you like 2 switchbacks ahead. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, I remember you catching me close to the village near the top and just not even waiting to say, hello, how's the climb going for you? You laid back there like an assassin.
Like, that's genuinely coming up to 20 years ago. And I was only thinking, cycling memories. Like, we've won cup finals together, played in Tolka Park, played for years football. The memories are so much more vivid with cycling. And I don't know, maybe you know why that is, but it's just something deep that you put your body to this very deep place, and it just becomes so memorable.
I still remember you not giving Percy your spare tube that day. He'd punctured. Now, to be fair, we didn't really know the etiquette around this, but like, it's pretty common human decency that he'd punctured, you still had a spare tube, and you're like, I'm not giving you my spare tube in case I puncture at some point.
It was absolutely, it's one of those moments where you just don't really understand how, like, this works. So obviously in hindsight, I should have just given him the spare tube. But just in my head, it didn't make sense. So we cycled home. I don't think we had phones even at that time. So we had to cycle home to get Noel to drive back down and then drive back up Alpe d'Huez to get him, to bring him home.
Yeah, that was an
error on my part. I accept that.
Yeah, those training camps as well, they were just every day full gas. Like, every climb I was driving to the limit.
It's exactly the same. It always happened. Everything we did, you always did to the extreme. And then I'd be like, no, lads, I'm taking a day off. I can't ride more than like 2 or 3 days in a row. And it was always the way. It was like, I always had this, be it good or bad, is some kind of, I think it might be like I had that sports anemia. I just wasn't recovering like you lads were.
I can remember then getting started racing. And there's a young lad in the club now, as I say, and like, my worry for him is the club's not, it's like, there was 4 of us, me, you, Passo, McKenna was coming a little bit later, Buggles. Like, if there's a crew around that were all similarly ambitious, who are all trying to go pro, or all trying to maximise, it's not coincidence that, like, out of those, everyone's winning national titles, getting contracts, going abroad, being on Irish teams, riding the worlds, out of a small training group. It's not like it's we somehow self-selected and found all these incredibly talented lads. It was the collective. It's the power of training with other lads and the power of sharing information, because it was never, And in hindsight, I've seen this is such a rare thing. It's never that I found a gain and then kept that gain to myself. I'd find a gain and then share it with the rest of the lads, and then you'd find a gain and share it with the rest of the lads. So it was everyone was bringing the whole level of the entire group up, and you didn't realize that until you stepped into the wider cycling racing, and then you're like, oh, we're winning straight away, or we're very close. Like I remember Passo winning races by like novelty amounts when he got started. Like you win races by 10 minutes and stuff, and you're like, whoa, actually maybe we're doing something in this little group that other people aren't doing as well, or they haven't tapped into.
Yeah, I think the key that you said right from the start, which was the advice you got I know in a recent podcast, was the advice you gave, was do what the good lads do. And like I've learned that not just for cycling, but for like life. Like now I'm playing golf, and it really is about like surround yourself with these people that are like doing this really well is a great shortcut, no matter what activity you're doing. And so surrounding yourself, it's kind of like, why is there so many great runners in Kenya? Because all these great runners are hammering each other out of it, you know what I mean? Like, and it's this great group. And so if you can find this tribe that you can get into, it can really fast forward your development.
But it's more than that even, because it's a group of mates and it's a group that are on the same kind of, you know, timeline moving towards something. So it's like, yeah, you could join a team, which, you know, I did years later, and there's lads who, they're sound lads and you get on with them great, but they're not your mates at the same time. It's like there's something different about when you have a group of mates that's doing it as well. It's just, I don't know, because you're building holidays around it, you're building, you know, social time around it, leisure time's all built around it. It just becomes like an apprenticeship nearly.
But like, yeah, what I really took away from our time together is that we all were at different levels. Like, as in, we all got to A1. We were all A1s. You were riding abroad. Everyone had their own thing, but we all met our like internal goals that gave us something that makes us feel special. And I think that's
I don't know if I did. Like, I don't know if I had a goal. I was thinking about this the other day. Someone's like, do you think you hit your cycling goals? I was like, well, no, I definitely didn't, because my goal was World Tour. So, but then I don't know, because I always really done that, where I'd set this goal that was just so far away that the chances are I wasn't going to hit it. But even if I got close, it was like, it felt like there was a lot of good stuff happening. But I don't know if I ever hit a goal that I really set out to hit.
The thing that I always struck me with you is like, when I was doing my first like A3 race, after like, you know, 6 months on the bike or something like that, you straight away went from the gun, like immediately. Like, and you were always like, oh, I don't care about winning the race. I just want to absolutely like smash it. And so that was always the next thing. It was like, oh, I just cared about results. I just wanted to get a prize.
You cared
that
about
day.
results really early, yeah.
And so like, yours was definitely a better strategy. You just didn't have enough road. You didn't start early enough to give you that progression.
Ran out of talent as well. Like, you didn't get to see that, you know, you're out with training with Mike Barry and you just see what he can do. And it's like, now there's an iceberg thing to that as well. We were looking at it and going, look, he did take EPO. He did ride for US Postal, T-Mobile, Team Sky. But when you see it in that moment and you're like, oh, what he can do versus what I can do, they're just very different. Here's a lad at the tail end of his career who's retired even. And I can't hold on to him out training. Like,
the people at the top of the world tour are the genetic freaks.
Yeah, like they're genetic freaks who've, if you think about what it is, like, it's crazy the world tour how it self-selects, because it's the U23, the junior champion. That's not enough to make a good world tour rider, because they're all U23 and world champions in multiple disciplines. So it's the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, and then it's like circumstances meets environment meets talent. It's incredible what they are up there.
Like, you had the work rate to do it, and to be able to deconstruct, like, obviously create training plans, research, incredible research. You didn't have the road, amount of time where you started, but you also, I don't think you had the DNA. Like, Passo was such a fast responder to Sean McKenna, such fast responder after he hit a certain age. These people just responded way faster to stimulus than you did. So you had that limiter. Now, maybe if you started earlier, maybe had a better diet, there's other things that maybe you can...
I actually think bike handling was a huge one as well. Like, I didn't get bike handling. Like, I would say in the later years with Aqua Blue and stuff, I was a pretty good bike handler, one of the better bike handlers in the bunch. That took me a long time to get. I think I needed like 10 years as a junior. Like, you know, racing Kermesses when you're like Adam Blythe, when you're 14, to get that. I never had it. And looking back, it caused so many hiccups for me. Like, I had so many bad crashes, and every one of those crashes was like, there's still legacy injuries I have now. Like, I can't externally, we were doing the gym last week. Like, I've so many limitations still from crashes of hitting a traffic island in France. You know, the crash I had you weren't there. I think you just left Canada at the time. Me and Passo went down to do a criterium in Detroit. It was actually 2 days. It's a funny story. So we went down to do a 2-day in Windsor, which is just south of it's in Canada, but just on the border. And then Detroit, just across the border. So Passo was stepping up to racing at this kind of pro or elite level for the first time. And he'd seen the carnage on TV at these national criterium calendar races. So all the way down, he's like, we're riding to the race, and he's like, I'm going to crash. I'm like, just stop talking about crashing. He's like, these are elite, these races. What am I doing here? Like, I'm going to crash. This is stupid. So we're literally, I'd say, 500 meters into the race. The race kind of stalls. Big sound around the outside from Passo on his own. And then I'm listening to the announcer as the laps go, and he's like, what a ride from Octo Cervelo's Colin Cassidy. And then he's coming through. He's like 30 seconds or something on his own, like cruising. Like, now there's still an hour and a half of racing or something left. And then I hear the announcer like, oh my God, no one likes to see that. Colin Cassidy is down, and he's down bad. He hit a traffic island on his own. Absolutely mangled himself.
Passo is one of the only people he just has that magic touch to be able to do stuff that is special.
Mangled himself. Like, so that night we're back in the hotel, and he's in the shower, like screaming, he's bandages all over him. So he doesn't race the next day. And I raced the next day. Bunch sprint. I can't even remember what happened. Massive stack up. I hooked my bars. I went down, like collapsed lung, broken ribs, broken shoulder, broken collarbone, mangled. The ambulance driver's like, comes up and he's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like the hospital. How do you mean what do I want to do? And he's like, if you go to this hospital in the US with those injuries, this could cost you 250, 300,000 euro. He's like, if you can get back into a car and go to Canada, I'd suggest you do that. So we got back in the car. Passo had to cut the skin suit off me, and I lay down the back seat of the car with a bottle of whiskey and some like Advil painkillers for, I'm going to say, a 5-hour drive back from Detroit to Toronto, straight into the hospital. And like, they kept me in overnight for 2 or 3 days. They're like, what happened? Just like, I was cycling to the shop and I crashed. They're like, how fast were you going?
So I remember that. I remember getting the call the next day, and you were like, oh, no, I'm done. And
that was me done.
I've got so many phone calls like this from you about, oh, I've done.
But that was the done one. That was it. I remember going down, meeting Mike Barry, who was coaching me at the time, about, I'd say 6 weeks later when I was like recovered. And he's like, what's the story? I'm like, no, I'm done. And he's like, right, you're done, but still get back. Like, you're not done in life. Like, you still have to get back fit. So you may as well get back and train and then see. And I went back down probably 6 months later. And I was just like, yeah, no, I'm done. The risks reward just doesn't make sense on this. And
I remember getting those phone calls from you so many times after, you know, broken collarbone. You had a good few broken collarbones. And I remember you saying you're done. And then almost every single time, 24 hours later, you just love the pain. You're back on the turbo in a sling.
Something about the comeback, isn't there?
Yeah, it was always something about you, but just the pain, the reward of that, doing that pain.
But you know, and that was one of my regrets, because the team I was with, Stellis Oncology, was a good team. They were sound lads. And the year that I didn't go back, so it would have been the 2014 or 2015 season, they brought in club world team time trial championships into the Worlds, and Stellis rode the world team time trial championships. So I would have rode the world team time trial championships with Stellis. Now, they didn't do super well, obviously, they're against Quick Step and stuff, but it would have been a nice one to finish on. So I do kind of regret that, but look, I could have killed myself again then. 2 broken collarbones that year.
But for you, there was always something inside of you that enjoyed the pain. Like, I remember we were at that charity ride for UCD in Galway, and we had to cycle like 260 kilometers for charity.
When you went in the beer that night,
that was
the ride home.
That was your fault. Like, you made me do that. So we were supposed to cycle down with like all these students, pushing them along, and it started snowing.
Oh, that was a brutal day.
And we had to split it up over 2 days, and we got down there, and we've ridden like 260 kilometers over like 2 days, and then we're out in the town with all these students. It was great crack, and you know, doing this and doing that. And I remember you got a pitcher of beer and maybe like down the pitcher of beer and then poured over the top of my head. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We're going home, and you know, whose bed are you going to, and where are you going now, and stuff like that. Like, oh, come on in here, come on into bed. We're cycling home in the morning. Like, oh yeah, we're cycling home in the morning, yeah. And I remember you woke me up at 6:30 in the morning because it was going to take 12 hours to cycle home.
It's a big send from
and
there.
it was December. I remember we rolled out and I was completely drunk. I remember we rolled out and I got a puncture and it was raining and like kind of sleety rain. And I remember we got a puncture like 200 meters from the apartment.
I can remember that, yeah.
I mean, we couldn't change it properly because our hands were so cold, and we eventually changed it.
And it was pitch black dark cycling. We had to go on a motorway on the way home. I don't even think we had lights.
No.
Pitch black dark on a motorway cycling home.
And I remember at one time we cycled along and I was like, what was that we just passed? And it was, you know, the way tires like shed off lorries. It was a tire on the side of the like hard shoulder. And if we were like 1 foot to the left, we both would have like, we were doing time trials.
Yeah, and again, that's like, didn't know anything about really food. I think we stopped at Subway halfway and had that, and that was like it for 200k.
Yeah.
Fat adapted, they call that now. But yeah, I don't know if it's...
What is it about the hardship or the madness or you're still doing that with your chamois time ride and we go out on a cycle and then halfway through the cycle you'd be like, me and Barrick in Spain are going to go off gravel here, and I go home, sit beside the pool for 3 hours. You come back 6 hours later, pitch black, and you're like, wait till I tell you about the day we had.
Oh, we'd someday that day on the gravel. Jesus. We were on a gravel, it got dark. And I remember just thinking how easily cycling can go bad. Well, not easily. We fairly painted ourselves into this corner. But we were on a gravel, on road bikes. There's no gravel bikes back then. Like, that's why the whole gravel fad, everyone's like gravel. It's like, I've been riding gravel for 10 years on my road bike. We had a day before the Ross, me, McKenna and Passo went around the cliffs on Hote Hill on our road bikes, and Sticky Bottle publisher going like top Irish riders on orthodox Ross preparation. But we used to always ride that stuff on the road bikes. But that day, me and Barrick descended this crazy gravel descent.
It said danger, do not enter. And I was like, right lads, I'm out of here, I'm going home.
And we got in deep into this wilderness in like Andalusia, and we're like, couldn't find our way out, but we were on this descent. And you know those descents where it's like you're going so fast it's out of control. Like, we're on rim brakes. It's probably like a 45% angle down. It's getting dark. We're coming down, out of control, can't stop. And we hit a chain, which someone had put across the road, which we didn't see in the dark. And I actually thought I chopped my hands off. Like, I had my hands there. I was like, my hands are gone. They're absolutely, I could just see blood everywhere. I was like, I've lost my hands. Look down the cuts I had on my fingers from it. I was obviously holding inside the levers. I was holding the bars, so the levers got completely sawed off, and then my fingers ruined, and the bars ruined. But both of us had the same injuries.
You came back and you had half lever, just stumps of
Yeah.
lever.
And we were making tourniquets from our arm warmers to stop the bleeding. We're like, no, we're gone here. But we couldn't find our way out there. We were climbing cliffs, like full cliffs.
I remember you recorded videos, but there was no signal, so you couldn't send us the videos.
Yeah, that was like our obituary we recorded. But we were climbing like 40-foot cliffs up to ledges, and we have arm warmers tied together, trying to like pull the bikes up to the next ledge. And then like I'd reach down and try and help him climb up. Oh.
And I was sitting there reading The Secret Race by Tyler Hamilton, sitting by the pool, and 7 hours later you arrive home, not looking well.
I don't know. I've always just enjoyed that kind of, I don't know, the road less travelled, or I don't know if it's for the story or like, we're explorers, aren't we? Like, we love exploring.
Some of us are, though. Some of us are the people that plan the exploration, and some of us are people who go out and risk their lives for this thrill.
Yeah, I've always liked that exploration. And even when we started training with McKenna, he was a brilliant counterpoint for me, because it was like, you get to the end, now we got ourselves in stupid situations, but you get to the end of the climb and you've done 6 hours, and it's like, right, we know we're turning home here. That's going to be middle of the night before we get home. And you'd be like, I wonder what's up that road. Like, sure, we go up and we check it out. And like, more times than not, it ends up being a good story. Like, would you get into bikepacking?
It's just like, I found it's this interesting contradiction. It's like, I love balance in my life. I love balance. I came maybe a bit of a chaotic childhood, and then I love this balance in my life. But then I also look back on the extremes that you do are the reasons that make you. I love balance because of the extremes. So the cycling, depending on what, we all have our level that we get goal level, where someone just does a 5k and they're like, that's my Everest. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can all look at other people that they're less, and other people that they're amazing. But for me, what I achieved out of cycling gave me this, I can do something that I didn't think I could possibly do. And I would say to anyone, like, do that. Surround myself with people like you, Passo, McKenna. You know, people push you beyond your boundaries, and that is an amazing feeling. But then also now I'm kind of like I hate getting into the sea now. I hate pain after being so cold and cycling all the time. It's like,
but like, how far removed do you think it can be? Like, some of those cycling experiences feel like they're a different lifetime for me. Like, I don't associate with them even. Like, how far removed from that pain can you be and still have ownership of it? We are so excited to announce that we are partnering with Whoop. Whoop are changing the game when it comes to wearable technology and health monitoring. Whoop is a wearable health and fitness coach that provides you with feedback and actionable insights into your sleep, your recovery, your training, your stress, and your overall health. Sarah and I have been using Whoop for years, and we love the insights it provides into our body's inner workings. It really gives us a look under the hood. And you're going to see Mathieu van der Poel, Richard Carapaz, and other elite level cyclists wearing Whoop. But it isn't just for those superstars. All the data is personalized to your unique physiology and fitness levels. If you're interested in taking control of your health and your fitness so that you can excel in all aspects of your life, you have to go and check out Whoop. Go to the URL now, which is join.whoop.com/roadman. I'm going to pop that in the description below, and you're going to get a free month's access to Whoop membership on me. I promise you won't regret it.
I remember just being in like races in Donegal and races in the Tour of Munster, Rossmoon, and just going, I love this hardship. Like, this is like, I remember getting up in a sprint in the Shea Elliott and going, I don't care if I die, I will sprint for sixth place here. I don't care. And like, I think that I just wore out of that. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I'm just not in that.
That's a weird mentality though, and I do think a lot of bike riders have it. I had that exact same. I was only talking last week to Sean about this. I came over Healy Pass, a Cat 1 climb in my first Ross when it was 2.2, UCI 2.2, and I came over the top of Healy Pass, and there was maybe 15 of us left in the front group, like just legends of Irish cycling: Timmy Barry, Dave McCann, Dave O'Loughlin. And I remember coming down that descent, and it was oily and it was wet, and we were finishing in Kenmare, and I had that exact same thought where I thought, I'll die rather than get dropped on this descent. So whatever lads are doing, whatever speed they're going, I'm following. I'm not touching brakes. I'm gonna die. I'm ready to die because it'll be a good story. Your man died in the Ross. They'll name a Saturday race after me, the Anthony Walsh Memorial. But I don't know, how do you tap into that? Like, is that
for me? It was like words of affirmation. It was like other people. I wanted you to say, "Wow, I was impressed by that." I wanted, like, you know, my family to say that's what motivated me. And so now, like, you know, I win a golf tournament, I fire it out to a few people and they come back and I know they're going to go, well done. But like, it has more moved to like my own. I'm starting to feel now more, I do it for myself. And so doing those extreme things, I'm kind of like, it's not really motivating for me now.
Yeah, I remember winning stage 3 Ross Moon, and you know, it's a stage as a training group a lot. We'd visualised that a lot. It was the Queen stage of our, you know, second biggest stage race in the country, and we'd spend a lot of time in crosswinds up the top of the mountains going, oh, we're on Valencia Island. And when I eventually won that stage, and I got a text message when I got back to the car of Ciaran Power, Ireland's highest ever placed Olympian, or I think that Ben Healy beat him, I think, did he, last Olympics?
Wow,
maybe, I think impressive. Ciaran Power finished 12th, I think, in Atlanta. But I got a text off Ciaran, who I wouldn't have had his number or really known him that well, and he said, Anto, that matters to people who know about cycling. Welcome to the club, Ciaran Power. And I was phenomenal. Like, fuck, that's cool. Yeah. It's like, that's really cool. Yeah. But it's, I get you from that, because it's kind of, you're not looking for, like, I never cared about an article on a magazine or a website, but those kind of people that have also been through hardship, to get their approval, that meant a lot for some strange reason.
So what matters now to you when you're doing these hardship? What do you think, if you could distill it, is your reward for going on those? Because they sound crazy to me, those trips.
The Chamois Time Tour? Yeah. I don't know if there's a reward. I don't know. There's no real reward for them other than the suffering and it's the counterpoint. I did this lad on the podcast, Colin O'Brady, and he's the first man to ever row self-supported across Drake Passage. So it's one of the roughest crossings in the world, and he rowed across it, And he paints this picture. It's like 25 minutes. He's telling me of how grim this is. Like the waves are battering over. At one point, he thinks the ship's going down. He can't row anymore. So there's a crawl space. So he gets into the crawl space and he's in there for like a day. And he's puking in there and he's shitting in there and he's eating in there. And it's like, it's tiny. It's like literally fetal position in there. And then eventually the storm broke and he came out with his crawl space. And he said it was just this beautiful, still calmness as the sun was coming up. He's like, he'd experienced 5, 6 sun up, sun downs, but nothing like that. And it was like, he had to experience the hardship to experience the pleasure. I think that's what the bike packing is for me now. We push it pretty hard. We do some pretty, like you couldn't, I get a lot of messages on Instagram saying, can I join this bike packing thing? It's like the type of person you need to do it. We describe him as hard to kill. Like I do it with Aaron Carney, and he's just a lad who can go, he can ride for 300k, sleep on a roundabout, and then ride for another 300k without even realising that's hardship. He's wired different. So the lads are well able to handle themselves. And because I think because of that, you're able to take on a lot of hardship. Like I had a 1% Whoop recovery score on the second day. That's the lowest I've ever had. Like you can't get any lower, you're dead. 1%. And coming off this ferry from Brindisi in Italy to Vlora in Albania. Like I thought it was a half an hour crossing because we'd done no research. It was 9 hours to crossing. It was like something from the famine. Like there was lads on the boat with chickens. Like it was absolutely horrendous. And then you're getting to the far side of that and you're trying to ride 200k off that. And there's a lot of parts. That whole trip is basically hardship. Like it's great laugh, but every single thing is hardship, from shipping the bikes on a boat to language barriers to bad food, no water, 40-degree heat. Albania and Bosnia are just rough places with rough lads, and you're constantly getting tested. But you come back from that, geez, you've never enjoyed a bowl of soup by the fire as much in your life. Like it's that Colin O'Brady contrast piece. I think that's why I still do it. It's to create that contrast. Japanese have something, what's it called? Someone in the comments let me know, Ikanagi or something like that, where it's misogi, where each year they encourage anyone who's an adult to do one task which you may or may not survive. And it's not taken literally that you survive. They mean it as you may or may not complete it. So it could be like for us swimming from here to Dunleary. Like you might do it, but chances are you probably won't make it and you'll have to get fished out. Once a year, they encourage all adults to do this misogi.
I would love to see you try swim, because you would definitely
there'll be a 95% chance I wouldn't make that, maybe even higher. But yeah, there's something in that. It's like you've kids now who are just coming of age, but we're one of the first generations, not one of the first generations, but this new modern era of technology where there's not a real becoming a man. Like, you would have had kids going into war. No one would say you come out of war a child, you come out a man. But we don't have anything now. So you're having like a pandemic of man children, lads who are 40, 50, living at home with their parents, still can't take responsibility, still don't have the attributes that you would associate with a man. And that's the idea of that misogi, to ground you each year in that almost, a lot of cultures, especially Indian cultures, still do like tribal ceremonies where kids will go out into the wilderness and then return a man. But the misogi is like you're topping that up each year. It's reminding you that you are like a violent person, that you are capable of hardship, that you are capable of enduring. And I don't know, I like that. In a very soft life that I live, it's a nice reminder of shit, we can actually do really hard shit and we're actually really hard to kill.
So I love what you're saying there. From my take on it is, I feel like I've done that. So I do think that people should, if they feel they haven't done something like that, I do feel I got a lot. You obviously still have that. Yeah,
I think you need to top it up. That idea of annual. I don't know I'm even feeling a bit soft right now. But yeah, we were chatting jiu-jitsu I started in the last few months. That really grounds you back in it. That's every day. You're just humbled and going, like, I'm only alive because there's a referee, and the referee stopped that guy from choking me to death.
But I do think there is, like, I hate the whole thing of, oh, this country is a joke, or the world's gone to shite, or, like, you know, everything's got worse. When, like, there's a lot of metrics that is patently not the case. But at the same time, there are issues that I see with parenting that obviously I face, and anyone who has kids is facing, is this doing everything for our kids. It's almost when we drop them to school when they should be walking, you know, there's it's almost to build up our own self-esteem that we are able to provide for our kids, when it's actually turning out to be quite the opposite. And so I don't know how that's going to affect them in the future with this whole, you know, facing challenges. And, you know, I think it's going to be a real challenge down the future, because we're not building up their self-esteem for themselves, that they can build it up by facing their own challenges, which is tying your laces. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, these are basic things that, like... Well,
the challenge is when you take those kids en masse and now you put them into an Olympic Games against a country that's hardened, that's us 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Like, I have had Mikel de Lagrange on the podcast a couple of times. Great lad. He's setting up the Amani project where he's brought cycling to Kenya. Like, the challenges these lads go through to even... like, create the space to go for a cycle. Like, they don't have roads. Yeah. They don't have bikes. They're in abstract poverty. Like, you talk about, we had bad nutrition. Like, try live in Kenya and go for a bike ride. But when they do come through, like, we're seeing it a little bit now with starting to have some of the East Africans come through to the World Tour, like, and they're looking like bike riders already.
Well, it's trying to... So how can we in ourselves create a hard mentality, I guess? So that we know we can face hard things, but the only way you can know you can face hard things is by facing them and either passing or failing. And even if you fail, like, the only way you know what your limit is by failing it. Like, you've gone always past your limit. Like, you know, I think it's something that people are scared to do. I was definitely scared to see what my limit is and fail. So I think, can we all try and push ourselves past our limit? Now, then we have to decide when it becomes dangerous or it becomes out of balance, and then what is our balance that we like?
Yeah, the danger part is something we chat about with the Chamois Time Tour quite a bit, because you do need some sensible voice at some point to rein this in and go, look, like, we're trying to have fun, we're trying to push boundaries.
We're not trying to die.
We're not trying to die.
Yeah.
Like, we had a point this year where we went to Bosnia, crossed the border into Bosnia. The Bosnian, like, security guard or whatever, National Guard, he was just, like, asleep at the border, and he's like, road is closed, you can't go. And we're like, can we still go? And he's like, go if you want, but the road's gone. And we started crossing this quarry, and we're 40-degree heat, out of water. We're crossing the quarry. We're probably 2 hours making like 200 meters of progress, walking across boulders, passing bikes over. And it's like, oh, jeez, this could go on. Like, the corner, or like we get to the corner, there's another corner. It's like a switchbacky road. We're like, this could go on indefinitely. But then you get to what's an interesting concept is the point of no return. Because now we're 3.5 hours deep of lifting our bike. And you're like, I can't go back. I don't have enough juice in me. Whatever my body battery is at the moment of 10% left, I don't have 3.5 hours go backtracking in me. That's psychologically a really difficult place. Not many people get to that point. I've talked to Sven Tuft on the podcast about it. He tries to do his version of the Masogi is every year he tries to do a point of no return challenge for himself, where he gets to a point where he's like, if I go forward one step, I'm not going to be able to get back. Like, I don't have the legs, I don't have the food, I don't have the resources to get back. And he's doing it in wild places with bears and wolves. And I think there's a lot of growth in that moment.
I would say there is definitely a lot of growth in that moment, but I would say these people that always want, my first question is he happy? Like, a lot of these people that push themselves, you see these, rock climbers that have to go free solo. No, a lot of these people seem to be doing these extremes until they die. Like, they're always chasing what happiness is. It seems that, like, I remember, I might be misquoting, but I think it was Steve Jobs' dad said to him, like, the key for you is to find balance. But, like, Steve Jobs wasn't put on the earth, it seemed, to find balance. It wasn't in his, like, DNA or psyche. That he was to create extremes with his teams and to create extreme that changed the world. I don't know if that's going to see, he wasn't a happy person.
Yeah, happy's a hard answer though, isn't it? It's like I couldn't answer that for Svein Tufty. Seems happy to chat with him, but like, you know, are you happy? Am I happy? It's like it's a hard answer.
Is it though? Because I'm definitely happy. Like, is it? I don't find that a hard answer.
It's not a static question. Like, you know, could have slept a bit better. Like, you know, it's not a yes or no answer.
But it's an interesting question. I think people could ask themselves. Like, I definitely asked myself that question, and I guess I can answer that fast. So if you think you can't answer that fast, maybe that's an interesting.
Yeah, no, I would have to unpack it a lot and go, well, happy, but like happy with what? Are you happy with your relationship? Are you happy with your physical health? Are you happy with your relationship with your parents? Are you happy with the contribution you've made to your community? Are you happy with where your spirituality is, your finances are? It's like to distill that all down to a yes or no, I think does disservice to the question.
I don't know if it does though, because globally, for me, I had a very interesting trip there recently. I went to Morocco, and with my wife Maria, and we went with a couple of friends, and I had a bit of downtime. Would have liked a bit more downtime, and I sat there and I journaled for the first time. Like, you know, you have to journal, and I was like, well, now I actually have time. I'm going to make time to journal. I have time, but I don't make time, and I broke my life down into all these different parts. You know, family, work, income, sport, hobbies, relationship, all these different things, and looked at them where I'm happy with, what I'm not happy with, what I want to change, what I want to do more of. Like I said, I don't like putting my kids to sleep. I'm wrecked at 8:30 trying to put them to bed. They're kind of a bit hyper and they're a bit overtired. And I was like, right, I'm going to do it once a week minimum. Like most of the time, Maria puts them to sleep. I put them to sleep, but I just go, right, lads, bedtime. There you go. Do you know what I mean? I've hang out with you for the last 2 hours. I don't need. But actually, I'm going to do quality time with them. And that's something that's actually been really beneficial to me. That's made me happier now. So I feel like I've put that kind of work in there, and I've seen some things that I definitely maybe need to do better at.
See, that junction from happy to happier is even funny. Like, you're having the introspection to go, well, I was happy. Like, if I had asked you 6 weeks ago, were you happy? You would have said, yeah. But now you had that time to work on yourself a little bit, and you're like, well, I added this one thing in and now I'm happier. So now the happier V2 version of Ciaran looks back on the 6 week ago version, and it's like, you can't look at that lens through a lens of other than, well, I wasn't as happy back then. So there's nuance to it for sure.
There's nuance to it, but there's also an external factor that, like, you know, I have control over certain things, and then I absolutely don't have control. So you ask, one of my kids gets sick, or my wife gets sick, or I get sick, or, you know, even as, you know, frivolous as I start playing really bad golf, to me, like my major passion, I might then say I'm unhappy, which is a stupid thing, but like, you know, we're stupid.
But look, gratitude is very powerful. Like, I was chatting to friends who used to cycle with him quite a bit. One of his kids isn't super well, but it's not terminal, young kid. But he was saying, look, could be worse, could be in Gaza. Like there's a lot of power in that gratitude. I'm pretty good with journaling. I do think it's that's a huge unlock for me is I like reading. That's been a massive one for me. Writing for no one else other than me. I don't mean writing like the weekly newsletter. I mean just writing for myself that no one ever reads. I'm a reluctant traveller, but I don't like traveling. Like, I hate being abroad. I hate going places, but I like being abroad.
Yeah, we're similar in that kind of way.
Like I hate the upheaval of it. I hate the getting ready, packing bikes, trying to front load work, all that. But then when I'm away, I love it. So it's probably those three things have broadened my horizons more than anything else.
I think the gratitude is really important. Like, I've did the kids last night. I've done doing the kids a good bit now, in fact. But like, I went to bed with the kids last night, and we jumped into bed, the three of us, into Maya's bed, and we were like, first thing I was like, okay, what are you grateful for today? And I do that every time I put them to bed. And Maya's like, oh, in gymnastics today, I did a handstand and a flip and this. And so like, Kuba was like, I'm just grateful for right now all us being together. And you're like, they're great moments.
You're gay.
They're really good moments. Like, they're really, really good moments.
If you could relive a cycling experience, what would you go back and do?
Gee, I have so many unbelievable cycling experiences. Like, I'd say the Ross was probably the most extreme though. 2010, I only started cycling first race season.
Did we race the Ross together in 20? Oh, we did. Yeah, UCD.
2007, I got on the bike for the first time, and it was 2008 was my first race season. So I only started racing in April 2008.
No, that was 2011, your Ross.
No, 10 was the Ross, and 2012 I stepped in when someone...
So was that my first Ross as well?
That was the first Ross. We did it together, yeah.
Huh,
And
interesting.
so you convinced me... So I'd only been racing 2 years. You convinced me. We went to the Corkman 3-day, or...
Yeah.
And you remember, I was coming down a descent, and my handlebar snapped as I was coming down the descent. It just broke in half. It was a carbon handlebar. And I remember coming down, I'm like, you're just looking down the descent, you're trying to focus on it. And all of a sudden my hand is under it, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. I can't look down, but my brakes aren't working anymore. So I clip out and start like dragging my feet along. And I remember got 7th or something the next day. I had to swap out a handlebar, and you were like, I'll let you keep that handlebar if you do the Ross in 3 weeks. And I was like, the Ross is like an 8-day race. I'm after doing a 2-day race, and one of the days we missed the start for.
Oh yeah, Jesus, I remember that.
We missed the start, and you jumped on the back of a car and got in, and I just kept going and ended up in the wrong town straight through on my own.
Yeah, that was the most terrified I ever was in a bike race. So I didn't get on the back of a car. I held on to Dan Curtin, who organised the Cork 3-day. I held on to his roof rack.
Another extreme moment that I was just not willing to do.
He was going so fast around some of the corners, and I didn't know how to hold on to the roof rack properly.
There's no way to hold on to a
No,
roof
there's
rack
a
properly.
better way than what I was doing. Like, my wheels weren't on the ground going around corners. So the bike could fully come off the ground going around corners. And so I'm trying to land the bike at an angle that it won't just whip out from me as I'm going around the corner. And he must be doing like 80, 90 kilometers an hour. But he's going so fast, I'm scared to let go because I can't get the coordination. I was like, this is where it ends. I'm gone here. Got back in though.
Yeah, you did get back in, and I kept cycling on, and the marshals had left the course at the stage, and I ended up cycling, and we were going for dinner later that night, and I was like, hey, I've been into this town already, this is on the course. And you were like, this wasn't on the course. And I was like, the course ended like 15 kilometers ago.
Yeah, that was
and
bad.
So then I ended up just doing the Ross. And so like it comes back to that thing of like the extremes. So like I was totally underprepared for that. I had a crash coming down in Oughterard, hanging onto the car, thinking I was on Eurosport or something like that. And when my cable snapped, and on a wrong bike, and hanging onto a guy who's never been in a cavalcade before, and he accelerates.
No insurance on the car either.
No insurance. The car was only 2 weeks bought. I remember Passo bought it for like 200 quid or something.
The Travellers, I think. Yeah.
And so totally underprepared for the race. Crashed after 3 days. Dropped in the rollout the next day. And I remember, was it Cassidy who owned all the bike shops, was the legend of the tour. He was like, I saw you dropped before the flag had even gone. And finished the Ross 8-day race, and like my gums were bleeding.
You are gone.
Yeah, and
you look like you had scurvy.
A friend offered me chicken nuggets in Skerries afterwards, and I was like, I couldn't bite them. My teeth were so bad, like because of all the gels and just like the sports anemia. And those are the extremes that I feel like I've done them now. So, but if the question was like, what would I do?
So you want to go back to that?
I just couldn't go back to that hardship. Like it's just like it's like a past life. It's like I've done that. That's in a box.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's moments like that where I remember Tour of Boats and stuff. I was just getting it so hard for so many days. I think I just finished the Ross, had a stage race in between. I was like having 2-3 days rest, and then I was over in Quebec doing Tour of Boats. I remember just being in lineouts. Philip Dykman, I think, was leading GC or second on GC. And I remember just looking at him one day. I was in a lineout in the gutter. He'd gone back for bottles even though he was his team leader. And he's riding up the outside of the lineout with about 25 bottles in his thing. Like, I'm hanging on for dear life in the lineout. He's just riding up the outside like he's going to the shop, chatting to lads. Any crack? How's the missus getting on? Do you want a bottle? Handing him out, riding up. And I was just like, there's layers to this game and I am not going to make it. You've moved across into golf now, and you've kind of put the same focus or the same system that we used in cycling. You've put that into golf. I'm actually struggling a little bit with jiu-jitsu to figure out, because it's so long ago since I ran that cycling template of figuring out like how did we systemize and look for gains in each of those areas. For someone that's getting started in cycling, what's the areas you looked at, or how do you think about segmenting a sport and breaking it down to work on the component parts?
Well, like I would guess it took me I thought I could self-coach in cycling. And I think a lot of people probably go into that,
that's
educate
a hard
yourself. It's hard. It's hard. Now you definitely can do it, and like I did it, and you know got good results. Like, do you know what I mean? As in, like they're all relative. Like you know, coaching for golf has brought me on like so much. I couldn't. I was talking to a guy the other day who was like 65 or something like that, 60 maybe, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm playing my best golf ever now, and I'm a 7 handicap, and I am, you know." It's taken me like 30 years, but it's amazing. And I've never got a lesson once. And I was like, he thought that was a claim to fame. Like, that was amazing. I was like, you could have had a 7 handicap 25 years ago if you had done that. Like, do you know what I mean?
Tim Ferriss has that question in, I think it's his 4-Hour Work Week, his first book, where he said, if there was an easy way, what would that look like? That's a brilliant question to ask, whether it's business, relationship, sport. What's the easy way to get good at this look like?
So something you gave me great advice. You mentioned it, and I mentioned it earlier. Do what the good lads do. Surround yourself with people who are better than you. Because we had kind of 2 groups in UCD. There was the lads who've been racing a couple of years and were enjoying the crack, and then there was you, Passo group, who wasn't necessarily in UCD straight away, but it was like you drive, and you were trying to drag people, and some people came with you, and some people didn't. And it was like, find people who really want to push the boundaries. And like, my life advice for anyone really, and what I always do is surround yourself with positive people.
Oh yeah,
well.
yeah.
It's so important.
It just sucks it. Like, I can't even imagine. We'd no one negative in our training group. But
There was no one going to go, don't do that. You'll never do that. You'll never be able to do that. Like, and like that life is full of that. And like people who think, like, it's funny, once you start pushing your boundaries, like people are like, oh, you did a half marathon? No way, that's amazing. You're like, it's not amazing. Like, it's amazing. It's all relative. Again.
Yeah, see, it normalised. And again, that's back to almost me probably not hitting my goal because I never knew what the goal was, because it was such big thinking that it's like, I remember Sean riding the Worlds, and it's like everyone texting amazing Sean riding the Worlds, and I was like, no, like that's what we trained for. Like, it's obvious that he'd be riding the Worlds. Why wouldn't he be riding the Worlds?
It is and then
looking back, it's amazing. Yeah. But at the time, it's just like, of course he's riding. Like, why wouldn't he be? That's what we do. Like, what do you think we're doing all day?
And I don't want to sound like a dick. And I like when I'm like, doing a half marathon isn't amazing. Everything is relative. Like, you know, me running a marathon, that might be amazing to me. But what you start doing then is you start realizing your boundaries are, because of the people you're around, they're lifting you, they're driving you. You start to realize that you actually can do way more than you actually thought it was. And so that would be something that like I would definitely advise people.
Okay, but the
like,
opposite, not the opposite, but the collateral damage to that approach has been, I undoubtedly torpedoed friendships and torpedoed relationships off the back of a singular focus to get better at cycling.
I remember very much so thinking I need to go cold turkey on you in cycling. I felt like you were like Roy Keane at his peak at you, and it probably was in or around his peak just after that. And you were like, it did feel like there was bullying at times. It was like you were so hard. You were like, I'd feel like I'd done enough, and you were like, it's not enough. It's
yeah,
not
you're
enough.
Constantly pushing a level to see if I could get other people to come up to it to bring my level on.
And there was definitely times where I felt you went way too far, but at the same time, looking back and like, everyone needs someone who is going to push them beyond what they think, because if it's not too far, you don't know what your limit is.
But do they though? Like, and this is the part now with age that I reflect on, where it's like, you know, you've kids now and maybe you reflect on it through that lens, but like, can you not just enjoy the sport? Do you need to find where that limit is? Do you need to push that limit? Like, because if you take it to the extreme past where we ever got, and you look at the great champions, you know, Wiggins is the example I always use, or Michael Phelps. Like, if it torches everything, like I torched some aspects of my life, you know, lucky I kept some key friendships and relationships with parents, and, you know, I met Sarah as a result, so I wouldn't change it. But definitely torched 2 long-term relationships with cycling and a bunch of friendships. But the extreme operators, they're torching way more than that. They're torching every aspect of their lives in search of performance.
Yeah,
so
like it's that you can't have balance in your life, which is, oh yeah, it's great, let's hang out next week, if you're actually searching for 0.1% increase.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for a 5% increase this year, but the next guy above you is looking for a 1% increase, and then, you know, the next guy is looking for a 0.1, and they will do anything to get that. And so you have to find what works in your life. And so like, that's where it does come down to me. Like, I have 2 kids now, and, you know, my life is in a very good place for me. I'm very happy with it. And so I just want to kind of maintain that. I don't want it. But then at the same time, the stuff I do for golf, people would see that as extreme a lot of the time.
Transform your indoor cycling with Rouvy, the platform that brings real-world routes and augmented reality to your training. Whether you're preparing for a big event or you're just looking to explore, Rouvy lets you experience legendary rides like Alpe and Passo de Stelvio from the comfort of your home. Rouvy's unique augmented reality technology uses real-life video and GPS data to create the most realistic cycling experience available. You'll feel every climb, descent and turn with precise terrain replication, giving you an authentic outdoor ride indoors. Plus, with AR elements like avatars and banners, the ride really feels totally immersive and interactive. With over 1,500 routes and 25,000 kilometers, the world's most iconic cycling destinations, Rouvy is perfect for cyclists of all levels. Whether you want to enjoy scenic routes, participate in group rides, or push your limits with advanced training plans, Rouvy has you covered. Rouvy also offers flexible pricing, allowing you to pause your subscription or choose duo or group plans to share the experience. From exploring new places to serious training, Rouvy has something for every cyclist. Ready to ride the world? Visit rouvy.com and start your journey today. Yeah, I've always struggled with those guardrails, and I can see it with Sarah now because she's training for Badlands this year, and one of our mates, Buggle, just stayed over last night and he rode Badlands last year. And I could see Sarah's just getting more and more infatuated with it. She's like she's already training like maybe 15 hours a week, which is pretty solid. Like, it's a lot more.
That's what I was doing when I was like, I'd finish work, and like that is extreme. Like, that's hard. I remember I train Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday after work, and then we do like 130k Saturday and Sunday. And I remember cycling out to Howth. I remember having a meeting with like our main boss in our main client, and it was in like a Michelin restaurant. And I remember not drinking during that. It was like December 15th or something like that. Not drinking during that Michelin restaurant meal and going straight down into the toilets, getting changed into my cycling kit and going out training that night. Like, and I'm just like what are we doing? Like, and like that was extreme cold. I remember it was so cold.
There's one Christmas or you didn't do it, but I went through Cycling Ireland's Talent ID, and so they filtered from 150 people down to like 10 people pre-Christmas, and then they were doing a 4-minute test to get the 10 people down to a squad of 4 after Christmas, but it was a power to weight test. So I had to go through a whole Christmas of basically eating nothing. Like,
I remember coming into your house around Christmas and you were drinking 2-litre bottles of Diet Coke, and you were like, this suppresses my appetite unbelievably.
Yeah, it does.
I have 2 or 3 of these a day.
Cheat code. Where did I get that from? That was Tyler Hamilton's book. Tyler Hamilton's on the fizzy water or Diet Coke. But he was pairing that with sleeping pills, which was that was the real winner. I used that quite effectively for the hill climb champs the year I came home from France.
Yeah, I remember.
Where I got to my lightest. I think 67.5 was the lightest I got to. Considering
I was 65 and I was super light.
I'm walking around at 83 now.
That's mad. Like, yeah, I'd say like I was probably 2 kilos under what was optimal, and you were probably like 4 or 5 kilos under what was optimal, I'd say.
But even you go to France though with that, and literally the first thing, your man picked me up from the airport, didn't even say hello, pinched me, and he's like, bit to lose.
Yeah.
Like, how toxic is that?
Yeah. Yeah, like, I remember reading, Nicholas Roach's book, and him going during the Tour de France eating just pasta and butter, or pasta and a drop of olive oil or whatever like that, and you're just like...
And he was like 10th on GC or something, or even better maybe.
Yeah. So it's... Yeah, look, we can get very extreme, and I don't think necessarily you need to be extreme to like push your boundaries, no matter what they are. I would say one of the real important things is consistency. Like, you mentioned it the other day on one of your podcasts, and it is so important, like consistency. I don't think I ever missed a session. So if I had a day on that day, I would go to 60 minutes on the turbo. If at worst I had to.
Yeah.
Just really, really just consistent.
And what I found is, and the data backs this up, that consistency is what defines our long-term outcomes, whether they're positive or negative. And most of the time, consistency is interrupted by intensity. So you do too much and then you have to take a break from it. So it's like the cheat code is easy often.
Yeah.
Whether it's golf whether it's cycling, whether it's, you know, going to the gym. You do too much in the gym, you get DOMS, you have to take a day off. Then if you zoom out and you look at the totality of that week going, well, I could have trained 7 days, just doing very light each day. Instead, I went on Monday and it took me 3 days to recover from a Monday session. And then you look at the totality of it, you're like, okay, I got 3 sessions that were big done, but the total workload of that is way less than the 7 easy sessions. And then you're ill prepared to go into the next week as well. So it compounds. So it's easy and often.
What do you think of this? Like, through my study on golf performance, 2 of the main things that keep coming up on what do professionals do better than average people at golf. And one is mirror work. So it'd be interesting how this works. So they get into their set position, they look at themselves in the mirror and they contort into the swing, and people do 40 minutes a day or an hour a day on just that movement, but that also then leads into visualization. And so then they think about that move when they're going to sleep or when they have a time, and they think about what are their hips trying to do, what are they trying to work on externally. Is any of that can apply to cycling at all?
I think that's the next, like if you look at from when we've cycled, you know, putting serious effort into it, the stuff that's changed massively, nutrition massively changed. You know, the new focus on 120, 140, 150 grams of carbs an hour is totally different. Aerodynamics, like you're looking at this like real-time coefficient of frontal drag sensors now.
Yeah.
Like you just didn't have that type of stuff. Like lad sent me on wind tunnel data this morning, just an amateur sending me on his wind tunnel data this morning. Heat has been the one in the last 12 months which has started trickling down from World Tour to amateurs. So you're seeing that if you do heat training, you define heat zones the same way you define your power zones on the indoor trainer. So I might come in here now and I do 60 minutes in zone 2 heat with 2 by 10 minutes in zone 4 heat.
But this has all been done. Like, this is all the new thing. Can like visualize it, because it's always the new thing. There's always the new, we're looking wind socks, whatever it is. What about visualization? Is that a thing
I think that's where it's going to go next. I think that's the next unexplored frontier. It's still a bit wishy-washy in sport though in general. Athletes don't rate visualization. They never have. You've never seen athletes that are en masse bought into, or you've outliers, you know, McGregor, I dreamt it into reality, or Ali. It's probably more prevalent in combat sports.
I'd be more thinking of like that basketball study, which you might have seen, where they tested 3 groups. They did one group that practiced 30 minutes a day free throws, another group that did 5 minutes a day, and then another group that just visualized free throws. And I don't want to, you know, ruin the results that I probably don't know the data, but I remember it was shocking how good the visualization.
I remember reading something similar to it.
How can that? Surely that has to be like, if you're like, athletes don't believe in it, but like it's irrelevant what we believe in. It's like, it does science maybe back it up in some way? Because in golf, it's definitely a thing. It's definitely a thing that high performers do, and I don't see that necessarily in cycling.
Yeah, I don't know if it, like track racing, visualizing the start. I've definitely used that before. I've talked to lads, World Tour lads, who say they had a very key job, like you had to position, you know, Contador into the base of the Stelvio, and your whole contract.
Renshaw used to talk about that actually.
Positioning calf. Yeah. Like your whole, Ryan Mullen has it now where he has to bring Danny Van Poppel to a certain place so he can let sprinter clear, you know, at a certain point in time. So your whole contract, your whole season, your whole stage is about switching on for a 2-minute period. Yeah. And like, you need to create a state. Tony Robbins talks about this. How do we elicit a state change? I've heard sports psychologists talking about the power of it, but I've never heard athletes saying they use it.
Do you think you used to be big into time trial biking, and people like triathletes listening in will be big into time trial? Do you think imagining being in a position could help? Do you think
I don't think so.
Just spending time on your bike, not necessarily riding it, like? Is that any of that could any of that help?
Look, I think it all helps, but it depends on where you're at it's like, don't major in the minor things. For most people, it's like, you know, people spend so much time sending me in questions about ketones or, you know, stuff like that, visualization, like very peripheral ideas, where it's like the main thing is, are you riding your bike consistently? Are you riding your bike the most you can ride your bike? Like even strength and conditioning, yoga, stretching, these things are amazing. But if you want to get better at cycling, cycle.
But that hasn't changed in 20 years, because you used to always say that to me in the off season. I'd be like, can we construct the greatest training plan, you know, core training plan? And you're like, I've come back with the research, and it's let's get on our bike more. Like,
I talked to the Ineos physio today, and he said like his pet peeve is people talking about core training. He's like, you want to do core training? He's like, go ride your bike for 4 hours, and he's like, put your raincoat on and off 4 times with no hands on the bars. He's like, you want, like, that's the core you need that's most functional. He's like, you don't need to be able to do planks for 60 seconds. You need to be able to take your raincoat on and off in the wind. And we obviously could have taught Rouvy that one a bit better. But yeah, I don't know. I think it will come to a point. There's some indoor training studies. I forget the name of the lad. I had him on the podcast. But you know, indoor training's historically been very boring. It's obviously getting better now with Rouvy and companies like that. But he's developed like a mental stimulation model for when you're doing efforts. So you're doing a 20 minutes of 400 watts, and you to touch lights on the handlebar and turn them off as you're doing the effort. And his data has shown that you'll actually get a bit more wattage out of you by touching these lights because it distracts you from the pain. I don't know if that's
really
different.
like, it shows like how we intuitively do stuff. So one thing I specifically remember and I like doing coming in at the end of races was with about 3k to go, and it was like go time to get onto whatever wheel it was. I remember you're in your worst glycemic index state. You're absolutely dying. You're you know, your brain is not functioning right. I remember going, right, I'm going to read 3 or 4 people's sponsor on the back of their kit, their number. I'm going to look at, and it just takes your brain out into this different zone. I remember going, okay, I'm tuned out of this kind of sheltered state of like surviving and going into like a different state. And that was something I just did. And I remember that whenever I didn't do it, it just happened. And I remember the sprint finish would finish, and you'd be like, how did that happen just so fast?
Yeah, like I'm still big on that. Like, you need to be spending the majority of your time on the stuff that's going to move the needle the most. And for most people listening to the podcast, that's just ride more. Like, even Sean, I remember the year he had this huge like breakthrough, and I remember if I was coaching him at the time or Buggle was coaching him at the time, but everyone's like, how did Sean get so much better this year? But he was literally, because he was a student at the time, and he was winning most A1 races, and he was training Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. And then his timetable changed, so he was able to ride Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So he added a Wednesday session in, and his level just came up massively, and that was just riding more volume. And I think for most people that's going to be just the unlock, is just riding more volume.
If there was one other thing, like some people, every person is limited to the amount of riding they can do, like, so we're all limited even physically or time wise. Preparation, I think preparation is so overlooked. It's something that held you back so much. And if there's one thing, like, so we obviously have preparation in golf, but also in the golf setup, I can have a world-class setup, which is basically just standing in the right starting position. So that's really important in golf. Like, you can put, as they say, Adam Scott, who's the most beautiful golf swing, you put him in a 20 handicap bad setup, you'll never hit a good score again. And so that's something, I can't swing like Rory McIlroy, but I can absolutely have a perfect setup. That takes coaching and takes expertise, but it is something that it takes a lot of practice, and pros spend a lot of practice. How can that be applied into cycling? I guess obviously a good bike fit, a good
look, you can nearly tell who's going to win a race by, if you showed me everyone's bag and how it was packed, I would give you a good swing at telling you who's on the podium that day. Like, if your bag is packed with love, if your bike is clean. I had a Navy SEAL, one of these tier 1 operators on the podcast, Nick Kumalassis, and he talked to me about just admin. And admin is everything that goes, like, supports the mission. It's getting your kit ready. It's the night before. It's the understanding the weather. It's the planning the route. Like, you used to, even when picking me up for races before, like, this was before Garmin GPSs in the computer. Like, you'd have a map with the towns that we had to drive through on the way there,
and the altitude.
Like, that takes the stress out of it. Like, just knowing.
We also had the
stuff.
race course. I remember I used to get the altitude off AA road maps or something like that, and you'd have the altitude on where the break, where the what the road and the steepest points of each climb and stuff like that. So like, I could not train physically like a pro. My DNA wasn't able to, my, sports anemia just always killed me like that. But I could absolutely prepare like a pro.
Yeah, and it's got better now, like, because you have stuff you wouldn't even know, like my best bike split, where you can put in your Training Peaks login into my best bike split. It'll take all your historic Training Peaks data, map it against the course, and it'll show you the best distribution of your power on this course, where it's you relative to your peers, where you're best putting in efforts.
That's amazing.
If you're doing time trials, it'll predict, it's predicted like Ironman bike splits within 10 seconds on 6 hour. It's because it plots wind, terrain, everything against it. So the stuff like that, or Velo Viewer, which I'll show you, like at Aqua Blue, we were getting better at it when we were leading out, like Matteo, we'd have Velo Viewer or Google Street View open, and we'd be like, okay, there's a roundabout with 2k to go, we need to be left of that roundabout. But that preparation, I think, for definitely a period of my life, and I'm definitely back in this period now, where the amount of time I'm putting into cycling, I'd maybe be better off pulling that back 10% and spending that 10% on admin. It'll probably bring me net forward, because I'd have clean kit, which I'd be more comfortable on the bike. Bike would be going better, less mechanicals, less chance of injury, meal prep, all that stuff that goes into a physio. You are very good at getting massages and stuff.
Yeah, and you have to look at, even if it's money thing, like you're looking at those new wheels. Your wheels are very good wheels. You have probably very good wheels. Spend that on a massage for every week for the next while. Now, look, I know there's some science behind massages maybe don't actually work, but do what the good lads do. They get a massage every day after, every Tour de France stage. So
yeah, and that stuff, what it does is brings you into, does it work? Don't know. Do ice baths work? Don't know. Do compression boots work? Don't know.
Feels good.
What I do know is you're not ordering a Domino's pizza if you have them compression boots on. Yeah. So it starts compounding and habits, stacking positive habits on top of each other. Look, if you're going for a massage on a Monday after work, you're dialed in, like you're still thinking about cycling. That flows through to Tuesday, to Wednesday, Thursday. I had Scott Murphy on the podcast, and he was saying exactly that. Like, does ice baths work? He's like, no one has any data on that. If they did have data on it, they don't care if ice baths work. They only care if ice baths make Adam Yates feel better.
Yeah. But placebo works, so
placebo definitely works. Gooch, it's been emotional.
Roller coaster.
Anything to add?
No,
for your fans?
No.
Do you know what we need to do is they had this. You don't watch UFC. They have this fight companion, Joe Rogan, on UFC, where they get like 4 lads and they just watch the fight.
I would love that.
And we need to get 4 lads in and just like watch a race.
I remember watching San Remo with you every year, and we'd watch it and sit there and we'd be like talking through it. Don't know how other people would like that, and you'd need to edit the text for some parts as well. But
we're actually thinking of doing it this year.
One thing actually that's really important, if you are racing, watch racing. I talked to my wife about volleyball.
Yeah.
So my wife is like, I'm training all the time. She's a really good volleyball player in Ireland, and I'm training all the time, I'm practicing all the time, and she was like, I just don't know sometimes what the coaches are talking about, or like they're talking about doing this, and I was like, you're not watching volleyball though. You're only playing it.
Inside out, you need to understand what's going on.
I would watch a cycle race, and I would watch like hours a day, but I would watch the finishes, because that's what we're in the cycle race for, is the finish. I mean, like, obviously the finishing on a climb is the finish where the guy made a break. I would pause that, I would rewind it, I would watch it over and over and say, and I could sit down with my kids now, and I watch sometimes when we watch a race, and I'd be like, watch his wheel, he's going to make the move here. And it's like, I think that's so important.
And you can do that in real life. I remember Timmy Barry in a stage of Ross Moon saying to me, your only job today is to follow Ciaran Power around and watch how he moves. Watch when he eats. Watch when he changes his raincoat. Watch when he goes back to the car. Watch when he talks to the commissar. He's like, it was like doing a 7-year PhD in cycling, being on how he moved through the bunch, where I was, moving around the outside of the bunch at like 600 watts to move up. And I just watched him going through the centre of the bunch, like he was speed dating, touching lads on the hip. How's the missus? Do you mind if I get into that little gap there? How are you getting on? Good to see you. I'm going to just squeeze in there. And it's like, how did I never think
the
of this?
Shortcuts for people's development are out there. Like, they're actually out there for people to see, and it's like people can make good gains on like some of those small things and make good gains out of them, and they're quite easy.
It needs you to stand still and purposefully deconstruct and choose your mentors as well, because there's a lot of people I see in clubs where you go out in a club and you're like, he's teaching you the wrong shit, but he's been just saying the wrong shit for a long time.
So he has authority.
And so he has authority in the club. And it's like, you go out in these clubs and they're screaming holes left and right, and you're like, what's going on? Like, how do they think this is just the normal way to be in a group, that it's just meant to be cortisol levels just through the roof, this stressful all the time? And then you meet, a totally different group with the lads who are all being good bike riders, and you're like, whoa, this is just different.
Comes back round to finish, which is back at the start, is surround yourself with that good group, the positive people that are going to push you. And I think like that's something that obviously you're doing with the Roadman group as well. I know it means a lot to you, and it seems to have a really strong group there. And like, I think that's what cycling is great for. It's actually making friends. I met my wife through cycling. She was in UCD Cycling Club, and I think it's really important to like. There's a lot of people out there who'll be listening to podcasts and going out and cycle on their own, and maybe don't really realize how great it is.
So is this your moment to announce the comeback? Is that what you're here for?
I'm back.
Are you back?
No, definitely not.
You're back. You'll do a.
Clip this up. I'm definitely not back.
You'll do a group spin. You'll do one group.
I
spin.
do need to do. I need to do a pre-group spin. You told me to come out the other day. Oh, we're only going out for 3 hours. I was like, I genuinely like. I've been on the bike twice, and like.
But you know, it actually is one of my regrets with cycling, and I suppose we'll address it in this right now as we're ending up. It's like I feel like you left a lot on the table just walking away from cycling. Like you left a lot of. You cut off an entire group of mates by walking away from cycling. Lads that you were good friends with, think very highly of you, and you never talk to them or you'll never see them basically again. A lot of experiences.
Could you say the same about you with football when you left football?
100%.
So like we move on, and like so I still see Passo, you know, but like it has to be, we all have to live our lives, and so that's absolutely true. I definitely I created a great group with cycling, and like the following year, sure, I was there when you absolutely smashed the Newbridge GP. I was in the back of the car, and in the following year I was in the car loads.
Yeah.
But then you start getting into your own activities, and I started running, and you know, then I started getting into golf, and it's like we can only, you know, be really great at certain things, and we can only spend time, like in that list that I made when I was away, how many friends I want to spend time with, certain amount of friends. It's like 3 people on that list. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like we only have a certain amount of time that we can really contribute, and so it's especially when you have kids, like, you know, you want to contribute.
See, I just look at my relationship with cycling. It'll ebb and flow. I'll go from periods of big sends, but I think it's going to be a lifelong pursuit for me. Like, I think I'll be riding my bike always, at least once a week with the lads. And I'm kind of sorry that you left that once a week with the lads, because it feels like it's such a valuable tool for health and fitness. And you've built that architecture, mitochondrial density, you know, that's all built, that architecture where you could just switch that back on, wake up that architecture and go, what, within 3-4 weeks, I will meet the lads once a week for a 2-hour spin, a 3-hour spin. It seems like that'd be a very healthy part of your life, but it's parked and it's gone.
I'll come out for a spin.
We're coming out.
We have to start with one spin. That's it.
Right, good to chat. If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.